Good evening. I'm standing at Swinton Hall on Fitzwilliam Street. But this is not the original Swinton Hall. This building is in fact Swinton's third hall. So I want you to take you back first of all to the original medieval hall. Now, we don't have an image of that building, but we do know it was the home of one of King John's favourite butlers. Now, King John, he has a bit of a mixed history really. He reigned from 1199 to 1216. His nickname was Lackland. And King John, he was noted, he lost the lands in the Duchy of Normandy. In fact, he lost most of the lands that the English monarchs held in France. And really, that was the end of what was called the Angevin Empire at that time. King John was also after a revolt of barons. He was compelled to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. Now, the revolt of the barons is an interesting point. So what's all this got to do with Swinton? Well, in those times, the monarchs had to travel around. They travelled in a retinue with most of their household, with guards, with members of staff, various hangers-on. And they travelled the land because the monarch had to be seen. It wasn't just a case of residing in a castle in one part of the country. They had to travel the land. And while King John was on one of his travels, he actually lost all of the crown jewels in the Wash in East Anglia. But he would also travel in Yorkshire. And being a butler was not just about being some kind of house servant. A butler was in charge of the king's household. So whenever King John came to this part of England, it's quite likely he would have descended on his butler's premises here in Swinton. And that must have been quite a task for the community to try and house and accommodate and feed all those people. Now, as I said before, we don't have an image of Swinton Old Hall, but we can give you a bit of an orientation of where it is, and also some farm buildings which were in that locality. So we'll look at some pictures now. This is the main road through Swinton, Church Street, and on the left of the picture is the site of the old hall, and some farm buildings can just about be made out. In later years, those buildings became used for builders merchants and also plumbers. George Hurst and Company had premises there. So you can see buildings which were in quite poor state of repair towards the end, but original stone buildings, part of the old stone heart of Swinton. Some of them do still exist actually. This is a view from the car park of the side of the Robin Hood. So some of the buildings still are in situ, but actually most of them are now lost. So that's Swinton's first hall, the first hall of Swinton. So moving forward in time, we then get the second Swinton Hall. I've got a photograph of that building here. We can just. This is from the Elizabethan period, and the top photograph here is Swinton's second hall, Swinton Hall. It was used as a shop premises towards the end of its life, and it lasted until about the 1960s, when it was actually demolished to create a garage. One of the residents of Swinton Hall was actually Richard and Mary Hattersley. Now, I spoke about them on an earlier broadcast, the Hattersley brothers, who created the Queen's Foundry business. And in 1881, Richard and Mary Hattersley were residents in the second Swinton Hall. It was quite a crowded site, and here we have a photograph of what it looked like in the early days of being a garage. The buildings at the side. This is a converted farm building, but you can see it's quite a tight site there. We are live. So then we now want to move forward, and we're now looking at the third Swinton Hall. Now, this building was created round about the 1800s, and it was created by John and Barbara Potter round about 1800, and it's described as built in the semi-Palladian Regency style. And the hall had quite extensive outbuildings as well. It wasn't just the hall. It had a lodge, it had stables, it had 2 staff cottages, and it had a workshop and storage facilities. Now, if we look at a map, we can actually make out from this map we have Swinton Hall. Across the road we have Swinton House. Now, Swinton House was the resident of Mr. and Mrs. Otter. They created the Swinton Hall across the road from Swinton House, and you can see the extensive parkland that it went down. This is what we now would call part of Horsefair Park, this open space here. And now we have also a noted Old Hall and the site of Swinton Hall. So it's the Swinton Old Hall, but also the site of the old medieval hall, not too far away. But looking at the site of Swinton Hall, you can see all the extensive range of buildings. It wasn't just the principal building. There was a whole host of buildings around here as well. Looking back at it, and people often ask, well, who lived in Swinton Hall? And well, the answer is lots of different people lived in Swinton Hall. It wasn't just one family. In fact, we've got a list of tenants here. From 1822, there was a clergyman called the Reverend Henry Bowen Cook. We had a man called Charles Faber, who was related to the hymn writer. And Mrs. Beckett, a Major Cook, an Edward Baker, a Rachel Barber. She was originated from Kimberworth, and she was the mother-in-law of Frederick Lee Harrop, who resided at Highfield House. James White, Robert Marsh, John Grayson Lord, Joseph Aquila Bower, resided in here for many years. He was the first chairman of Swinton Urban District Council. He was an architect and a builder, and he built many of the schools. And then we had Mr. Jagger, who lived in Swinton Hall for many years. Now, towards the end of its life in the mid-1970s, there were about 3 people were living here, and it wasn't particularly good conditions. And eventually the hall was boarded up, and its future looked somewhat uncertain. Very fortunately though, it was acquired by the Ben Bailey Company Limited, and they fully refurbished the hall. They had to put a new roof on, and they had to, and so the roof is new. The hall was completely gutted, absolutely inside. It was just a shell. And interestingly, they found a safe inside the hall. It was a safe made of stone with iron bands around it. Nobody quite knew why the safe was created. But that was one of the interesting finds that was in the hall at that time. So it's now been changed into apartments, and they started to be let out in around about 1982 time, when people started occupying the different apartments that's here. One thing that did happen though was most of the old outbuildings were in a pretty poor state of repair. And it was decided that they couldn't be preserved, and so if we look around, we can see we're now in a cul-de-sac of houses called Milton Court, and each one is different. And Milton Court allowed an entrance to come in around the back of the hall, and create this development really, which then sort of takes over what was the parkland of the hall. So in a way, we are round the back of Fitzwilliam Street. So the hall looked down. It looked down on a slope towards the parkland. A few more photos while we sort of conclude as to what the hall and its grounds looked like before conversion. This is an interesting one actually. This is a wedding photograph. And this is taken in the grounds of Swinton Hall. It's a wartime wedding. You can see the groom there is in his wartime uniform, and that photograph was taken at the side of the garden of Swinton Hall. Some further photographs here, which show again the side of the hall. It was completely covered in ivy, but you can see the shape of the windows, and we have just another quick one to show you. This is the elevation. This is looking from Fitzwilliam Street, and you can see this is the corner of the hall as is now, But all this has been sort of swept away to create the entrance into Milton Court, and around here were the outbuildings, the cottages. Quite an extensive household at one time. In the 1871 census, we had the Mr. Cook, which I mentioned, his wife, 2 daughters, and 4 servants. But there was also in the cottage a groom and a coachman, and another couple of cottages which were tenanted out. So, who lived in Swinton Hall? Many people, many different people over the years have lived in Swinton Hall. It was always sort of let out on a tenanted basis. Again, the Elizabethan Swinton Hall, again, had a variety of people living there, but right the way back to Swinton's medieval hall was a butler who worked and was a keen supporter of King John. So that is a real link with Swinton's medieval past. So our final building, which we have today, is a Georgian building, and a very fine building it is, and very fortunately that it was safe for the community, and now is a sustainable use as private apartments. Thank you very much.